Planning Commission, welcome. We have just one item on our agenda for tonight, but before we do that, let's go to, are there any public comments not listed on the agenda? I am seeing none. Okay, so we'll move on to Planning Commission minutes. There's draft minutes for May 10th and May 24th. Commissioners, any comments?
I have no comments.
None for me, except I was not here the 24th.
Okay.
No comments.
No comments. Okay, could I have a motion then on the minutes, please?
I would move to approve the May 10th, 2010 Planning Commission minutes.
Second. Call the roll, please.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the May 10th, 2010 and May 24th, 2010 Planning Commission minutes.
Just May 10th.
Just May 10th.
Okay.
Sorry.
I got it. Commissioner Kidwell.
Aye.
Commissioner Lajoie.
Aye.
Commissioner Groner.
Aye.
Commissioner Stein.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. So our first hearing tonight is conditional use.
Chairman?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say we could approve the May 24th.
Oh, we're gonna do those, yeah. Okay, May 24th.
It says there is a-
Yeah, okay, be on that one, got it.
Correct. And I have no comments about this.
Close? No. Okay, roll, please.
And I would move to approve the May 24th, 2010 Planning Commission minutes.
Second.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Stein and second by Commissioner Kidwell to approve the May 24th Planning Commission minutes. Tony, what's the vote?
Commissioner Groner. Commissioner Kidwell.
Aye.
Commissioner Stein.
Aye.
Commissioner Lajoie.
Aye.
0-1.
Okay, our hearing tonight is on conditional use 10-01 and site planning SP 10.01. This is a conditional use and site plan and design review application for Atkinson Memorial Church Education Building. And before we get started, actually, if anybody would like to speak tonight, you need to fill out a comment card, and Tony has a comment card, so you can get a hold of him.
Also in the back left corner of the room.
So they're in the back left corner there. With that, I will turn it over to staff.
Good evening. I would like to read the quasi-judicial hearing procedures that apply to this matter. Notice of this matter has been provided, and in it, along with the staff report, lists the applicable substantive criteria at issue before this commission. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed toward the criteria identified in the notice, staff report, or other criteria in the plan or land use regulation which the person testifying believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. At this time, I will ask the Commission if they have any ex parte conflict of interest, or bias they wish to disclose. I know we went through this last time, but I just want to update everyone, and I want to give Commissioner Gruner an opportunity to disclose any contacts he may have.
I do not. I obviously visited the site, but no other conflicts other than that. Or no conflicts, sorry.
Anybody else have anything new?
Just, no, nothing new, just business.
Nothing new.
Nothing new.
All right. This time we'll turn it over to staff.
Good evening, Commissioners. This conditional use and site plan review is for the Atkinson Memorial Church Educational Wing addition. Planning Commission last reviewed this on May 24th. And at the time we continued to tonight's hearing. There are some outstanding issues that we've started to take a look at with the design of the building. In particular, the issues of architectural design, the issues of window transparency, the issue of parking, the issue of tree preservation, and the issue of setbacks, and I'll briefly go over those issues. With respect to architectural design, there's a significant amount of material in the record already with respect that talks about the building footprint and building materials. As you know, the Historic Review Board heard the remand of the Historic Review Board application on May 25th, 2010, and voted 4-0 to approve revised exterior building materials for this new building, and that included a conditional approval to include real stucco on the breezeway, and I believe the applicant has included some of that on their revised site plan. The issue of parking, we're still at the point where we need to provide a staff review and response to what the applicant has recently submitted into tonight's record. What the applicant has submitted into tonight's record is a square footage evaluation of the uses in the existing and proposed buildings to give us a better idea of how those uses are being moved around, and how approval of the conditional use would affect their use of the spaces for those uses. Their intent with that analysis is to show that there is no significant impact caused by the addition of the wing, and that the uses that are proposed in the new space are the same uses that have been proposed on this site historically, and they're just attempting to show that they're using those spaces more efficiently, and they will describe that in more detail this evening. The original staff report did not include findings for compliance with Tree Protection Code, OCNC 17.41. We did make a brief finding that they had to show compliance with 1741, but we neglected to include detailed findings for 1741. So in your packet tonight, there's a additional section of findings for tree protection 1741. Briefly, what's being proposed now is to attempt to preserve the 8-inch dogwood at the corner of the site. They are planning to remove 3 trees in the vicinity of where the 2 parking spaces would be, and they will also be planting I think between 10 to 14 new trees on site as part of their landscaping plan, and as mitigation trees for any trees that are removed. So what the revised staff findings are in the record showing that they meet 1741 through their shows an option, which is removal and replacement of trees, but they are attempting to preserve that dogwood. We've included a recommendation to have a arborist on site during excavation of the root area of that tree to ensure that the protection requirements can be met. The way the Tree Protection Code is written, you have a very specific set of tree protection during construction procedures. Or you have an arborist on site making sure that the trees are protected. We're recommending that be a condition of approval so that they can actually move forward and protect that tree. That tree would be proposed as a street tree on that elevation of the site as well. So the original condition of approval to include street trees separately on site would remain, and there would be street tree protection covenants for the on-site trees. The applicant has proposed some revisions to the site, which they will explain in more detail. The transformer is proposed to be moved into the center of the site, away from the street frontage. There are findings made with respect to transparency. I'll briefly go into that. When the church was built in the 20s, we did not have transparency requirements for commercial and institutional buildings. We now have transparency requirements, so the church is considered a non-conforming structure with regard to that. At the pedestrian level, on the elevation where the wing is proposed, they have about 23% transparency. Once the addition is made, they'll be moving closer towards conformity with this 60% transparency requirement, and Commissioner Lajoie raised that issue at the last hearing. Under the code, we have a precedence for buildings that are moving closer to conformity with those requirements. And in this case, there's a section of our site plan and design review which was adopted in July that states that if you have a modification that can better meet the intent of the site design requirements, the planning commission in their discretion can approve that modification if it does a better job or meets the intent of meeting the design review requirements for the use. And in this case, staff is recommending that that modification be made. Since the Historic Review Board has already approved the current layout of the windows, and it fits with the historical nature of the Atkinson Memorial Church, that's an additional finding that we will make in a subsequent staff report. Applicant has also turned in a letter, so I'll just briefly go through the various exhibits that are new to you tonight. There's the findings for compliance with 1741, that would be Exhibit A. There's a letter submitted from the applicant's attorney describing compliance with the outstanding code issues. With respect to their revised site plan, that is Exhibit C. There's a presentation which will be up on the screen and which is on your computers as Exhibit D. A one-page letter describing the transformer revisions, trees, and transparency issue. That's Exhibit E. Exhibit F is their use chart documenting square footage of the uses within the existing and proposed building. And Exhibit G is the packet from the appellant, Mary Johnson, which is a 22-page packet. And with respect to off-street parking, what the applicant has done an analysis for right now is to show that the existing church is not being reviewed for compliance with parking standards. We're looking at the new addition. To the extent that the new addition has an impact on parking, they're showing 14 new spaces on the street and 2 new spaces off-street, which are the 2 ADA spaces. The staff is yet to make a formal finding with regard to 1752 compliance in that regard, but we will be looking at that in more detail. So if you have any questions for me with respect to those outstanding issues, we'd be happy to try to answer those. Otherwise, we have the applicant testimony.
Commissioners? No questions? No, nothing.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jill Long. I'm a land use lawyer at Lane Powell. Our address is 601 Southwest 2nd Avenue, Portland, Oregon. I'm here tonight representing the Atkinson Memorial Church. I know you've heard a lot about this application in the previous hearing, so we won't be going over everything tonight, but I'd like to focus on 4 issues that remain a little bit maybe unclear or could use some further clarification. Before I move to that, I'd just like to take a moment to recognize the many members of the Atkinson Memorial Church who came in support tonight. Wow. Do you all want to stand just really briefly?
If you aren't already.
And all the people around. So thank you very much for standing. You may be seated. I just wanted to recognize that they came tonight to support the application. They're really here just to listen and be supportive of the progress that the church hopes to make on the education wing tonight. I thought I'd like to start with just a brief project overview and talk about the general aspects of the project. I've got a really brief PowerPoint, but the church decided to do this project for a number of reasons. One was to create some additional ADA accessibility for the church. A large portion of the new education wing will provide an elevator and wheelchair ramp so that people that are wheelchair bound can much more easily have access to the church building. Another purpose was to provide better accommodations to the Oregon City Preschool. The Oregon City Preschool has been on the church campus for a long time, and they're today in an old house that doesn't accommodate a preschool youth very well. And then the third purpose was to provide expanded classroom space for the existing religious education that goes on Sundays with the church. So we've got an aerial view up here, and I think I can make a hand. Oh yeah, there it is. So I know everyone's familiar with this site, so I'll be pretty brief here, but here's the large historic church. To the left is the Oregon City Preschool. This building will be demolished, and the education wing will be placed on this area. And then behind that is the parsonage building. This building will remain. Nothing changes with this building. The one note is that during the construction period of the education wing, the parsonage will be the home for the Oregon City Preschool. So during the construction period, Oregon City Preschool will be housed here, and it will move back over into the education wing in the same site after the construction period is finished. I'll move on now to talk about the use that's planned for the new building and how that relates to traffic impacts and parking. I've got a chart, and the plans for the new building are no expansion for the existing church uses or the existing preschool. Although the building is larger, the footprint allows for the ADA accessibility and gives a more efficient classroom space on a one-story level versus the two-story house that exists there today. Oh, that works nicely. Okay, sorry about that. The footprint of the proposed education wing can be seen here, and obviously the footprint is quite a bit bigger. What the footprint doesn't show you is that it's one story versus two, like the preschool is now, and obviously the removal of this old garage, which is also part of the preschool site now. The uses that will be occurring in the new space will be the preschool that currently exists and the religious education classes that currently exist. This chart just helps to clarify the square footage changes. There are approximately 1,900 additional square feet that will be added to the campus in classroom additions as part of the education wing. What that translates to into use is that the preschool will actually have a reduction in use. And why that's possible is that we're going to move from this old building that's not very well set up for a preschool into a smaller square footprint, but that allows for a more efficient classroom style. The church use is really not part of this application, but I'm going to run through it just so you see that it doesn't change as part of the application. Sunday worship occurs in the large building. It's roughly 6,700 square feet. Nothing will change with Sunday worship. It will not expand or change due to the education wing. The church also houses midweek activities and some community room use. Things like Alcoholics Anonymous, they have adult groups, choir. All of those are well settled in the existing church building, and they'll all remain within the church. For instance, the choir will still practice in the sanctuary where the choir has always practiced. So there's no change in those midweek activities. The church administration has about 720 square feet in the church right now, and after the construction period, they're considering moving that to the parsonage building. Now again, the parsonage building isn't being changed or added to as part of this application. But as we're reviewing the uses, we included that. And then finally, the religious education classes. And those are the Sunday classes that occur as part of the Sunday worship. Currently, those are in the church basement, which is about 3,900 square feet. Those will move to the education wing and, again, take up less space because it will be a more accommodating environment for classroom use, and that'll be about 2,100 square feet. So the chart kind of hopefully breaks down some of the uses that occur at the church and explains in a little more detail that there's no expansion of use as part of this project. The education wing is a replacement for a current facility that just better accommodates the uses that currently exist on the site. Any questions?
Yeah. Question for you. Church administration, 720 now. It'll go to 846 and moves to the parsonage. What happens with the 720 inside of the church?
Well, some of that will be lost with the addition and the accessibility corridor.
Okay.
So some of that will be lost there.
Separation.
Right. And then some of that, there's some overlap with other uses that'll continue in those spaces, existing uses.
Any questions?
No.
This relates to the code criteria is in regards to traffic impacts and parking impacts. Because of no expanded use, and we've got 2 traffic engineers with letters in the file that have found there will be no traffic impacts associated with the education wing project. Additionally, on parking, again, because the church use will stay the same, there's no required analysis for new uses and enlargement of use as the code language calls out. And so there are no issues with parking. The preschool itself requires 2 spots, and there are ample spots on on-street parking along the frontage of the education wing, up to 14 on-street parking spots, very adequately meet the needs of the preschool. And again, the project will also include 2 ADA spots on site that will provide off-street parking, somewhat associated with the new ADA accessibility, so that someone using the ADA spots can have direct access across the campus to the new elevator and into the church building. I wanted to address briefly a concept that's been raised in the previous hearing and some of the record regarding monitoring or capping of church uses. I think in the past there was a little bit of confusion about what this expansion of square footage might mean in terms of expansion of use, and hopefully we've clarified that some tonight with the chart and the testimony. But I want to be very clear that there is no expansion of use associated with the education wing, and for that reason, ongoing monitoring or capping of uses is unnecessary as it relates to the church. Furthermore, a requirement like that would be outside the scope of the application and really an undue burden on both staff and the applicant. And we find that the criteria certainly doesn't call for it. The criteria are met based on the lack of expansion of uses and the findings that show from both the traffic consultants and the application that there is no impact on traffic related to this application. Move on now to the modifications, the setback and transparency requirements. The code allows for modification of requirements when they better meet the intent of the standard. And there are 2 modifications necessary for the education wing. One is on setback and one is on transparency. On the setback modification, what that allows is for the building to blend better into the historic neighborhood. On the 6th Street side, the setback allows the church to remain to be the visually dominant feature and not detract at all from the historic landmark by having a larger setback. On the Jefferson Street side, the larger setback allows for the project to be more in scale with the residential uses surrounding it, so it blends better with the neighborhood and allows for the historic neighborhood to function at the highest compatibility with the education wing as possible. The code allows for the Planning Commission to modify these so long as they better meet the standards or equally meet the standards of the criteria. One thing to note is that the Historic Review Board is reviewing the transparency issue, and the code specifically calls out that when there's a historic overlay zone, the Historic Review Board may make the determination regarding compatibility with the historic neighborhood. And the Historic Review Board has determined that the transparency issue fits best with the compatibility of the landmark and that 23% transparency that exists in the landmark. And then again, this moves, as Mr. Walker mentioned, this moves us to more conformance, going from a non-conforming feature of transparency to more conformance by adding the 33% and I believe 38% to the new building. Taken as a whole, all of these modifications meet the standards of the code. They provide for meeting the intent of these requirements and the criteria, and they allow for significant compatibility with the historic neighborhood. Talking about the historic neighborhood, I wanted to mention briefly the Historic Review Board application. I know we've talked about this already tonight. That's pending currently. There was an approval by the HRB, and now that's been appealed to the City Commission, and we're pending that hearing on July 7th. There's nothing in the code that would require that one track be finished before the other. The code allows for 2 tracks to be followed by the applicant. The site design, or the site plan and design review code specifically allows for the Historic Review Board to make findings and approvals related to design guidelines in the historic neighborhood when appropriate, such as this application. Therefore, Atkinson Memorial Church is moving through that process as required. Separately, they're also moving through the site plan and design review process before the Planning Commission is also required. Both of these applications must be satisfied in order for the project to move forward. Therefore, the Planning Commission can move forward with this application, knowing that the Historic Review Board process will run its due course and an ultimate decision will be made there. If it was necessary to have both bodies review the same criteria, any applicant would be in a really difficult position, having possibly different decisions at the end of the day that require different things. Allowing the 2 tracks to move forward as planned allows for efficiency in applying the criteria. It allows a body filled with people that have special or expert experience related to historic review to deal with those portions of the project, and allows the Planning Commission to deal with the portions of the project otherwise related to the site plan and design review criteria. So we urge the Planning Commission move forward with this application with the understanding that the Historic Review Board will have a process that comes to conclusion and a decision will be made there on the issues related to that. Finally, I want to conclude with just a couple modifications that we've made to the site plan in response to some neighbor concerns. We spent the week with PGE. We were able to relocate the transformer. We just got word on Friday that we were able to do that. So the transformer, can you move here? The transformer is going to be moved here to the interior of the site. It'll be screened from the street by the ADA parking stalls. I think this is a great result, and we're really happy we were able to make it happen. And then additionally, the dogwood here on the corner of the alley in Jefferson is also going to remain. We recognize that we need to be very careful during the construction phase to preserve the tree, but we have a plan for that, and we're very positive about the ability to keep this tree. So we were also really pleased to be able to relook at that issue and keep the dogwood tree. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners?
I have no questions right now. Anything?
I don't have a question.
Thank you very much.
Okay, well, now, are there any comment sheets?
Mr. Stoltz, I believe.
So we have 3 minutes. You have 3 minutes. State your name and city of residence, please, before you begin.
My name is Greg Stoltz. I live in Oregon City. I'm here in support of the church in Oregon City Preschool. I spoke at the previous Planning Commission meeting, and in that meeting I was speaking on a generally personal basis about my support. Now I'm coming to you speaking on behalf of the school as the school board president. Again, supporting it, saying that the school body and the school board definitely support this. This is something that we've been working with the church for a long time on, and they've been very cooperative with us. And I think you can see from the things that they've been doing to modify their plans that they're very interested in working with all the parties involved, us included. I think it speaks to the fact that for Oregon City Preschool, we're going to be a going concern at that location. The intention is to stay there. We're working with them to sign a long-term lease. We want to stay there. They want us to be there. So from the perspective of the use of that facility in the long term, it's going to continue, as far as I can tell, for the foreseeable future as Oregon City Preschool. In terms of the use, I spoke a little bit about it last time. I would just reiterate that there's no intention to expand the use of the preschool at all. We're limited by other factors, not just the facility itself. We're limited by the number of teachers. We only have one. That's all we want to have. That limits our class size. Our maximum class size is 18. We currently don't typically fill our classes with 18, usually, especially for the smaller children. It's a much smaller number, like a dozen. So the use of the facility is not going to change. We're not going to grow. The parking issues, there will be no, additional parking requirements or anything from the move into this new facility. So with that, I would just again ask you to please approve this as soon as we reasonably can. Thank you.
Thanks much.
Mrs. Johnson?
I just know you all have my letter.
I'm sorry?
Do you have my materials?
The Exhibit 7 was last exhibit on your screen and in your pack.
My name is Mary Johnson. I'm attorney for Margaret Foss. My address is 500 Abernathy Road, Suite 4, Oregon City, Oregon 97045. I want to address the off-street parking issue. The code provides that in the event several uses occupy a single structure or parcel of land, the total requirement for off-street parking shall be the sum of the requirements of the several uses computed separately. Here, there's religious, the applicant has asked that all of the property lines as between on that block all be erased. So we have one single parcel of land. We have the church, which is a religious assembly building. We have the education wing. We also have the parsonage, which has additional classrooms in it. We have a community meeting room, an office, and a preschool. And the applicant has not provided the number of seats available in each of these meeting rooms, and so the record is incomplete sufficiently to calculate the amount of spaces. Just a bird's eye view, there's about 9,000 square feet of gross leasable space. That would compute to about over 100 parking places. And these are off-street. You can't substitute on-street for off-street. And this is a big problem for my client who lives on Jefferson and only has on-street parking. So I would urge the commission to properly calculate the required number of parking spaces. Now they can be reduced somewhat, but there's certainly going to be a lot more than what has been proposed. And the applicant's argument that there's no expansion of use is incorrect. There's testimony on the record that the church is going to increase by 4% per year. They're increasing the leasable space by 80%. There's also testimony in the record that there's AA meetings there, which are community meetings 7 days a week. So all of those uses need to be taken into consideration. I would like to request a continuance of this hearing until after the Historic Review Board decision is final, because what we'll have is a risk of inconsistent findings and conditions if you move forward tonight, because you're the ultimate arbiter of the city code in planning matters, which overlaps with the HRB. It's not bifurcated between you and the HRB, but you have to have the HRB certificate of appropriateness for you to apply Chapter 17, Section 52. We do appreciate the changes that the applicant has made. However, on the landscaping, it needs to be traditional and use traditional plants, which is not part of the submission. And I'll take any questions with my remaining time.
Repeat that last part again.
On the landscape plan, under the design guidelines in the Historic Preservation District, it requires traditional style, traditional plants, and not excessive ground cover. What we have is a modern style with native plants that may or may not be traditional. and a vacant, planting strip on Sixth, on the long facade, which would be contrary to what we want to do and what the code requires. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. That's it. Okay. So that's it for public comment. There's no others out there? Okay. Then we will go to rebuttal. Yeah, rebuttal from the applicant. Thanks.
I wanted to talk about parking again for just a minute. The code at 1752.010 requires parking to be analyzed if there's an enlarged use or change of use. We've demonstrated clearly that the Atkinson Memorial Church Education Wing will be neither an enlarged use or a change of use. It's simply new accommodation for existing uses. Therefore, the criteria mentioned by the opposition isn't relevant to the application before us tonight. Additionally, regarding expansion of use and the testimony in the record previously, as a courtesy, the church did analyze if the new accessibility might lead to an increase of congregation or attendance at the church. And they found, not on an annual basis, but on a one-time basis, that it could increase from anywhere from 3 to 7 people could be attending the church additionally than are today. Both traffic engineers reviewed those numbers and found that they were minimal and insignificant to any impact on traffic or parking. This information was provided simply as a courtesy, as a way to illustrate the limited and low impact on the neighborhood that the education wing will have, and it shouldn't be considered to be an annual increase of a certain percentage. Additionally, again, we're talking not about an enlarged use, not about a change of use, so that factor isn't really relevant as it relates to the application. In terms of the increase of square footage, there will be an additional 1,900 square feet that will come to the campus as part of the education wing. We walked through the uses and how that plays out, but it's important to keep in mind that a large amount of that square footage is used for the accessibility area, what we call the transition area, and the corridor that connect the existing church to the education wing and provide for ADA access. When you look at the breakdown of uses, and I bet I can go back, the square footage of the uses actually reduces. We're not claiming that there's going to be reduced use. It's going to continue with the existing use, but through efficient use of more modern design as it relates to classroom use, the existing uses can be accommodated in a more efficient pattern. So again, the 1,900 additional square feet does not amount to any change in use or enlargement of use, and doesn't change the traffic analysis or parking analysis. In terms of the HRB, again, we stress that finality on the HRB decision is not required for the Planning Commission to move forward. There's been no citation to the code that would require that, and it's an undue burden on the applicant to expect that. The Planning Commission does not need a final HRB decision to know that the compatibility with the historic design guidelines will be met. Knowing that that decision will be obtained in order for the project to move forward gives the Planning Commission that knowledge and that understanding that the design guidelines related to the historic review will be met. If we were to wait for the Historic Review Board to finish and then move forward, the testimony from the opposition makes it sound like then again those reviews would be up for review again in terms of looking at the compatibility with the historic district. And that just doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of what you're asking an applicant to do. It's necessary for both tracks to be followed, for both design guidelines and the site plan and design review standards to be met through the bodies that are given the authority to make those decisions, and for both tracks to move forward as planned. Again, there's nothing in the code that will require otherwise. Finally, on the landscaping issue. Yeah, did you have a question? Okay. The planter strip that's on the street side is very small, and it has overhead electrical wires that make it impossible to plant sufficient street trees in that area. Working with staff, we were able to find an alternative location that provides the intent of the street tree standard allow street trees to be in the street area without being limited by the smallness of the planter strip and the overhead electrical lines. So the landscape criteria is satisfied in that manner. Staff has supported it, and we find that it fully meets the intent of the standards related to street trees and landscaping. Be happy to answer any other questions.
Any questions? No? Not at all.
I do, actually. So, although I know that it was offered as not necessarily that we could compel that testimony, but that there was going to be, and I read and I wasn't here, so I was just reviewing the minutes, but Ms. Erickson had testified and anticipated a 4% growth of the church. And you're here telling us that that doesn't correlate to the education wing. Can you explain how that would not correlate to the education wing?
Well, any organization may grow over time. Any existing use may grow over time. The education wing doesn't provide new uses. It doesn't allow the church to do new things that it's not doing now. The only thing it allows is better ADA accessibility to church services. So, although there might be some growth related to the existing church use, the religious education classes, the worship, those types of things, that use isn't changed by the amount of square footage available to the church through the education wing. I think especially when we look at the breakdown of uses and square footage, we're not talking about a big addition that doubles the size of access for church members to maybe begin new programming. And there's no new programming planned. So, as a courtesy, we wanted to provide that information. I hope it wasn't confusing and kind of made the issue seem less clear than it is, because it's very clear that the proposed education wing will not change the uses of the church or cause the church to grow, other than the natural ebb and flow. The church could grow or decrease in size, just as any organization may experience growth in the future.
Mr. Chair, one more thing. Is the 4% figure a historic figure that they point to?
To be frank, I don't know where the 4% comes from. Maybe that's the percentage of the number of trips related to the ADA accessibility.
And I wasn't there, but I'm just going off of what I read in the past testimony of Ms. Erickson last time. I believe it's the 24th. There's a church anticipated a 4% growth rate with this new addition. That's the quote that I'm reading.
Yeah. And one of the reasons we wanted to come back tonight and do a presentation was there was a lot of testimony last time. There was some inconsistency, I think, in what the various people understood to be the purpose of the education wing. And so we took the last 2 weeks together to make sure that there was a lot of clarity in terms of what I understood to be the purpose of the education wing, and then to come forward tonight and present that. So hopefully that gives some light on that issue.
Okay.
Any other questions? No. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sure, Paul. We did receive a request from Ms. McGriff from McLaughlin Neighborhood Association.
Oh, okay. So we could allow it, but then we could have rebuttal of it? Okay. Given that it's the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association, it would be appropriate. So let's allow it.
She is.
Thank you very much. I was in the back door tonight. Thank you very much. Denise McGriff, representing the McLaughlin Neighborhood Association Steering Committee. We previously testified before you at the last hearing, and the only thing we wanted to add for this evening is that upon reviewing the revised site plan, obviously moving the transformer and getting agreement from PPE really helps that frontage view there on Jefferson. In addition, we were concerned about the removal of trees, and I think they've adequately resolved that as well. So we continue to, as a steering committee, voted to recommend that you support this application. And that's it for tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So I don't think we'll need rebuttal.
I don't think we'll probably Great. Okay. We have, should we close the public hearing?
We've received a request to continue, and we've talked before, subject to the planning commission, we can continue the hearing to date certain, which would be June 28th, or we can close the public hearing but leave the record open for written testimony for a period of time. As the record has been open for the last 2 weeks, and we've had now 2 full hearings, I'm not sure you want to go and hear additional testimony. In the event that you think we've kind of heard enough oral testimony, but we want to give people an opportunity to submit some final written comments as the materials that we did receive today could be viewed as new and trigger your right to respond. What I would recommend is that we close the public hearing, leave the record open for written submittals only that responds to the new evidence submitted today by 5 p.m. on June 21st. Under state law, after the 5 p.m. expires, the record closes to all parties except for the applicant. The applicant bears the burden of proof, so they get the last word. The applicant will have, ordinarily they get 7 days, but in this case, the applicant has requested in order that we can move forward on June 28th to submit their oral argument, or written argument, on June 24th by 5 p.m. That will allow the Planning Commission to reconvene on June 28th for deliberation and a decision. That would be the Commission's pleasure. That would be the schedule that I would recommend.
In response to Ms. Johnson brought up concerning the appeal of the HRB decision, that is scheduled to go in front of the City Commission on July 7th. The 120-day deadline for a decision from the city expires on July 8th, I believe, for Historic Review Board decision. The next hearing would be July 12th in front of the Planning Commission. So there's, just in response to what Ms. Johnson brought up at the request of continuing it to after the Historic Review Board decision is final, that is when that's the scheduling timeline for the Historic Review Board appeal. But once again, the attorney has laid out what the recommendation from the attorney would be for your consideration. But just to make sure you understood what all the options and what Ms. Johnson was requesting in terms of calendar and timing.
Right. Commissioners, thoughts?
My feeling is to close the public hearing and keep the record open for written testimony that's relevant to the new information that's been presented tonight. That's my feeling about it. I think this situation it looks like 2 sides to it. There's an opponent and there's an applicant, and I think we could have another public hearing like this and hear similar arguments again. But I think we've heard the arguments. If there's additional arguments to hear, let's read them in writing, and when we convene next time, we can have a discussion and make a decision. I do have a question for Ms. Richter. Do you concur that the HRB process and this process moving forward simultaneously or concurrently is an appropriate mechanism, or is that a judgment that we all will make being in this position?
My sense of it is that to run it concurrently would be impossible because of the nature of when you all have meetings, when the City Commission has meetings, and when the HRB has meetings. Ultimately, this decision is appealable to the City Commission. So the sooner we can get your decision up there, the closer in tandem they will be, correct?
So it's not important to wait for the HRB appeal to conclude before we make a decision. That's kind of where I was going.
I think it is up to your discretion ultimately, but I do not think that there is any you have no legal obligation to wait.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
And I do have one question for Ms. Richter. I think Ms. Johnson testified that we were the ultimate arbitrator in this decision. Is that correct or incorrect?
You both have different roles. And HRB is the ultimate arbiter of a certificate of appropriateness, and you are the ultimate arbiter of a permit for site plan design review.
And what role is the City Council then? I guess in my head
they are both If there's appeals, they will review both decisions.
Wouldn't that be then
They-
the ultimate arbiter?
They would be the ultimate.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's what I was looking for.
The
Thank
ultimate
you.
final.
Ultimate means ultimate. So I guess that said, my suggestion would be to take the recommendation of City Council as Commissioner Stein.
I concur. Yeah. And me as well. I think that this is the right way to go about this. So, so how do we move forward? Do we just, do we
I didn't write
vote?
down all the dates.
I think I got the dates. So we're closing the public hearing, tonight. We're gonna keep the record open, but you can only submit written information over the next 7 days. That will be the, what is that, the 21st at 5 PM, everything has to be in.
It can be in by email.
Mail, fax, or hand it over the counter to the planning department.
And then the applicant, normally would have 7 days to respond after that. They're only saying they need 3. So June 24th is,
I think.
right. June 24th, and then, for June 28th hearing date. Is that right?
That's correct. 5 PM, June 24th. The applicant will submit their final written argument, and then we will reconvene for deliberation and decision on June 28th.
I like that.
Commission, have any questions for staff?
We need to go on the 24th.
28th,
28th.
2 weeks from today.
We'll get in from anything that's written, we'll have by the 24th. So we'll have 4 days. Okay, so the applicant response by the 24th.
I did have a question, for Pete. Pete, you said you were going to provide additional information on the, 1752 parking, issue.
Yeah.
What we'll need to do is look at the square footage calculations and, arrive at a final recommendation with respect to the adequacy of the parking. Also, we will give you an update on what, if any, agreement exists to use the parking lot in the back of the church, even though that is not being reviewed right now. It was requested by the appellant, so we need to respond to that. We'll probably have John Replinger, our traffic consultant, submit something into the record for your review then as well.
We will, staff will meet the June 21st deadline as well.
Okay. Then is that it? Can we have a motion then, please?
So I move to continue to the June 28th hearing date, with leaving the record open for written comment only,
And to close the public hearing?
and to close the public hearing.
We have a motion?
So that's my motion.
Second.
Call the roll.
We have a motion by Commissioner Groner, second by Commissioner Lajoie.
Commissioner Kidwell. Aye. Commissioner Groner.
Aye.
Commissioner Stein.
Aye.
Commissioner Lajoie.
Aye. Okay. That is our, is there any other, so that concludes for tonight anyway, conditional use, for the Atkinson Memorial Church. Is there anything else that, staff would like to discuss with us?
Just for updates, staff-wise, we received the application for the jug handle project for the land use component of that, so you should be seeing that in the next month and a half or two. It'll be coming in front of you because of some of the natural resource overlay district mitigation that they'll be proposing as part of that application. Other than that, it's been relatively quiet in terms of large applications being submitted.
I guess I have a comment or a request. Wondering if we could, we get a status update on where the downtown parking study is, and if anything towards implementation of that, if that would be appropriate.
Well, and that would include the downtown circulation plan.
And lastly, I guess I should have mentioned it before, but the turnout tonight is terrific. I wish we were able to see, the level of support or opposition on other application.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you should be applauded in your turnout.
That's right.
Absolutely.
This is the best thing that we Yeah, this is the best thing that we can see. When it's empty out there, we're wondering if people care. When people, we love it crowded. So that, whatever side you're on, that you care. That's what really matters here. So, okay, with that, we are adjourned for tonight. Thank you very much.